And welcome back, episode 122 of the RUDIS Wrestling Podcast from the Twin Cities in usually frozen Minnesota. I'm Jason Bryant, and probably from the warmer RUDIS home office, joined again by Matt Dernlan. Matt, am I right there? Is it much warmer than 18 degrees right now in central Ohio?
Oh, it was insane. I dropped my daughter off at school this morning, and like every kid that was walking into school was wearing shorts. So yeah, it's unusually warm in Ohio. I think they're, like anything at this time of year, it's going to be fleeting. It's going away very, very quickly. But how's things up there, up north with you?
As you might expect, I'm actually getting very good usage of the new RUDIS beanies that came in. So I'm rocking America and RUDIS, and of course it's functionally warm. So as my hair starts to recede in my age, now that I'm in my 40s, I have more use for these type of things. And this is super warm. So I'm pretty pleased with it. It's definitely going to get a workout from now until it thaws out in March, because again, I'm trying to make sure that we are warmer than St. Louis, or we're warmer than Pittsburgh, or warmer than Cleveland come national. So that's one thing I was trying to preach, and hopefully that doesn't come in and bite me in the rear end. But Matt, we've had a lot to unpack. Yesterday's show, we talked pretty much exclusively on Penn State and Iowa. We've got other things to talk about today. We'll talk about Nebraska and Ohio State, more about the match, less about the team point deductions that we harped on, a little bit about Wisconsin, Purdue, a key match in Oklahoma State, Missouri that complicates how we do the rankings at 149 pounds, or how the rankings people do the rankings at 149, and how Iowa capped off its weekend at 184 in Michigan State, and then the complications from 184. So a couple weight class breakdowns, but one of the matches we've got this weekend, we've got a number 2 Penn State at number 9 Wisconsin. We've also got a top 10 matchup in the ACC, something that's never happened, as NC State and North Carolina, longtime rivals. They will do battle both as top 10 teams for the first time in school history against one another. They've been ranked in the top 10 together 4 different times in history. 2 of those have been this season. The other 2 were in the 81-82 season. So big one there, going back to Bill Lamb, Bob Guzzo. Now we've got Coleman Scott, Pat Popalizio, a couple Oklahoma State Cowboys leading their teams. And, in the ACC, that's a big duel this weekend, and it's one we're going to be watching on Friday in Raleigh.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a lot of fun. I think we prefaced like the rise of the ACC and where they're sitting, but just across the board, top to bottom within the conference, I don't think that we've seen this type of depth and strength from everybody in the ACC. I think we've seen a lot of some good team performances, some good individual performances over the last 5-6 years. But just the depth of quality that is surrounding and is encompassing within the ACC right now is really exciting, across the board. I mean, it's, I know most of the time we're talking a lot about the Big Ten programs, because those are the teams typically that are residing and occupying the top 10. And they're also inhabiting most of the individual rankings. But now I think it's exciting that we have another conference, and there's teams from every conference that we talk about and poll. But when you talk about depth of quality, top to bottom, like you could probably argue in some instances where the ACC, the numbers are smaller than the Big Ten, but the quality top to bottom might be more than the Big Ten.
Well, the bottom is one problem that we've got with the ACC, because we all know Duke is non-scholarship, and it doesn't seem like that's going to change anytime soon. And Glenn Lanham has done a yeoman's job there. Right now, they're really having hard times. As Jacob Kasper's graduated. The remaining Fine Silver twins, the other set, they're redshirting and actually competing for Israel, trying to make the Olympic team there in freestyle. So some things, if Duke can win, and this is a speaking topic. Later on, maybe we can get Ohio native Jacob Kasper to talk about it a little bit. His brother, actually, Drew, having a really good season for Otterbein this year in Division III, an undefeated guy, another tangent there. But we talk about Duke, but 5 of the 6 teams in the ACC have been ranked this year. Virginia is on that fringe. They wrestled Virginia Tech tough at John Paul Jones Arena, drew almost 2,000 fans there on Friday night before Virginia Tech headed down and smashed my alma mater on Sunday and finished things off there. But when we look at the ACC, top to bottom, I think your top 5 of the 6, the percentage-wise, yes, absolutely right there. Again, the bottom, I think that's what hurts us the most in the ACC is Duke. They've been shut out multiple times this year. I think there's been some 50 spots put up. I don't want to, again, beat them up too much. They are a non-scholarship Division I institution. Works in the Ivy League. Well, maybe there's something that Duke needs to do. maybe different. I don't know. Probably Glenn Lanham's probably pursued all the options to try to find ways to get it to a comparable situation with the Ivies. And even though the Ivies don't have scholarships, but Duke had a good dual meet team a couple years ago. They were in the rankings for the first time in school history, so they can. It's just I just would love to see what that program and that coach Glenn Lanham could do with a little bit more support and maybe some scholarship money to throw around. I'd be really curious to then maybe the argument we could have is top to bottom would not be such an asterisk with Duke.
Yeah, and I think I don't want to say that Duke is an outlier, but essentially they are. As far as the program is run, the level of resources and scholarship dollars that they do or don't, more importantly, they don't have, I think is a big factor. But it's been really, really impressive to see what Glenn's done down there. He does. He's had a competitive dual meet team. He's had individuals make the podium. So he's showing what he can do without a lot. And I know, I'm sure his administration is talking about, well, you have the Duke brand, the Duke name behind you, but okay, that's well and good, but you also have to be able to get into school, right?
I grew up in Virginia, Tobacco Road. I grew up in ACC basketball country. Duke has the name recognition in basketball. Their football team's made a bowl game or two in the last decade or something like that. But in wrestling, I'm sorry, the Duke brand does not mean anything to wrestling people. It never has until Conrad Dudziak made the finals that year against Mark Allis. That was the first time that the Duke brand meant anything. And you know what also helped the Duke brand was a guy like Jacob Casper, who was very outspoken about the Duke brand. And then the Fine Silver, the two sets of twins, the first time in NCAA history you've had four brothers on the same team qualify the same year. Those things have helped the Duke brand with wrestling. Duke's branding hasn't helped wrestling at all. And it's basically for the guys like Connor Hartman, who was a three-time All-American, the Fine Silver double sets of twins, Casper. We've got Conrad Dudziak making the podium for the first time. The Duke brand to me is it's not something that you've got the Duke branding. No wrestler cares about the Duke branding. Okay, basketball players care about the Duke branding. We'd love to change that. We'd love to change that big D actually means something other than I'm thinking of a D. I can't think of a D word. Matt, help me out here.
I
disappointing in terms of the scholarship situation. I don't know.
That was a much better, more politically correct term than I was going to use.
I mean, Glenn's a good coach, man. He really is. And their facilities aren't terrible from what I understand. It's just, man, it's a tough school to get into. I mean, if, Cornell and Harvard and the Bucknell's a fine academic institution. I mean, we've got really, really good academic institutions that are doing something. I think the only other comparable team we can look at that's non-scholarship in Division I is maybe Franklin and Marshall, and they really can't even compare because they're a Division III institution in everything but wrestling and I think squash. So, I mean, they are, you used the term outlier earlier. Yeah, there's a couple outliers out there, but I don't buy that Duke branding thing meaning anything to the wrestling community right now.
Yeah, I think more pointedly, we need to give credit to Glenn for growing the Duke wrestling brand, right?
Absolutely.
Because that was pretty much non-existent before he took over. I think have been some individuals in the history of the program, but by and large, what he's done to make it a credible program, and it has been credible, more than credible, and more than respectable. Like, he's done a phenomenal job. So what I'm saying, under their current restrictions, I think what Glenn has shown, every 5 years, he's probably going to have a group of guys that go on a run where they're really, really competitive, but then they're probably with the restrictions that they're working within, they're probably going to have seasons like this as well, where it's going to look a little down and it's going to look like, what are you doing with the program? But I think we have to remember the guy doesn't have any scholarships. He doesn't have a huge budget, and he probably has academic restrictions that are as stringent as any other academic institution in the country. So you factor all those.
Yeah, I mean, even Davidson now has more scholarship money than Duke does. And we're talking about comparable academic institutions again. But again, the Davidson brand, for example, in basketball, now it means something, at least in the last 5 or 10 years, because that guy who shoots all the threes from Golden State did a pretty good job with their program there. I think his name is Curry. He's pretty good.
Something like that, right?
Again, yeah, we get to the team. I didn't realize we were going to go off on this Duke thing as we were talking the ACC. I'll bring it back into NC State and North Carolina because that's the focus for the ACC this weekend. number 3. North Carolina State up to number 3. They are the only other unbeaten team in Division I wrestling. The other, of course, Iowa, which we, again, beat to death yesterday. And the last thing I'm going to mention on the Penn State-Iowa thing is this came in from the Big Ten Network about an hour before we started, that the Penn State-Iowa duel was the most watched wrestling telecast in Big Ten Network history and the day's highest-rated college sporting event across all networks. So that's crazy. 342,955 watched this, according to Nielsen Media Research, which eclipsed Ohio State, Penn State 2 years ago, which had 309,000. So we're still talking about this because it's everybody's talking about this. Huge eyes on a Friday night, and that is a win for wrestling, for Penn State, for Iowa, and a win for the sport as a whole. I am stoked to see that news come through my inbox this morning.
No, and you've got to believe that the Big Ten brass has taken notice of this. They're monitoring this. Obviously, this has been a rising trend. You know, the more coverage, they're understanding. We have such a passionate fan base. You give them the content, people will tune in and watch. And then you put the product that was on display Friday night. I mean, they've got to be salivating. They've got to be the Big Ten Network has got to be thinking, how do we create more opportunities to expose this sport? How do we give it a bigger platform? So, yeah, I mean, credit to the teams that performed on Friday night. Credit to the fans who packed the arena, and credit to the fans that were sitting at home tuning in. We keep banging the drum. We keep banging the drum about how do we get more visibility, more eyes on the sport. Well, this is the way you do it.
Yeah, it was a tremendous duel. We beat it to death on episode 121. You want to hear us talk about that, you can go back through the feed and 121. One thing we didn't talk about a whole lot, and I think based on the amount of stuff that we've got coming up with some of the weight class discussions we're going to have today, Nebraska 19-14, although it should have been 21-14. And again, we've gone off on the team point deductions, but some of the things that were notable about this match, of course, Mikey Labriola's late match heroics to get the win over Caleb Romero. Rocky Jordan, we'll talk about 184 as we get down to that breakdown. Seems to be turning the corner, knocks off Taylor Venz 3-2. Colin Moore, workman like 5-2. Heavyweight, I'm going to pretty much skip over because it wasn't really doesn't really impact the national rankings, although another Jensen brother with a win for Nebraska. We get to the discussion now, 125, Malik Heinzelman, the situation there. So we'll dial it back up to where the duel started, 174. And general thoughts about where we went through with this duel. I mean, it was a pretty exciting duel. The rankings have been switched around. Nebraska jumped to number 4 in the coaches poll this week. Ohio State has dropped to number 6. Arizona State splits the difference at number 5. So, it impacted the rankings for sure.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, this is another highly competitive duel. Yeah, 2 great duel meets this weekend. We talked in depth yesterday about the other one, but this one coming down to the last match. There's a lot of intrigue similar to what we saw on Friday night by the ebbs and flows in the matches, the questions that came out of this match. Where these two teams still have to address some significant weaknesses, where they're rising as a team, where they're gaining momentum at certain weight classes. But when you look at these two teams, these two teams very much are thinking they're in a trophy hunt, and rightfully so. So I think there was probably, just case in point, like the other duel we talked about, a lot of questions, but a lot of answers on the same side from both sides of the table. So yeah, I mean, interesting duel, a lot of things to unpack. And, I guess the first place to start would be, get into some of the discussion about 125 and the struggles of Malik Heinzelman. I don't know if you had any thoughts to start that conversation, JB?
Well, I was watching last week when I was at Minnesota, Ohio State, and I'm sitting next to Jeff Beachy from the Guillotine, one of the fine wrestling publications here in the country and in the state of Minnesota. And Jeff looks at me and goes, man, if there was still a 118-pound weight class, it was kind of where the discussion went to, because it just still seems like he's undersized. Now he's not small, but he's small, if that makes any sense. And I'm just curious if it's just the chew it out, spit you out grind of the Big Ten is really kind of doing a number on it. I mean, I know Tom Ryan, I was listening into their team huddle as I was doing some interviews at that Minnesota duel, 2 weeks ago at this point. And it seemed like they were excited that he took some shots. And maybe that's the situation, is the confidence in the offense, because we know the abilities there. We know the talent's there. And we've seen the will to win, the know how to win. He's won at every age level. Now he's struggling here at the college level. And is it a pull the trigger thing, or is it just is it a confidence thing, emotion and the mental game of it? But I mean, what are the options there? Because he's clearly the most talented guy at the weight, and he's not going to miss weight in this regard. So I can't really put a question mark on it, because going into the season, I'm going to say Malik Heinzelman beats Alex Thompson, not comfortably, but he beats him, and now that match has been reversed, and I'm like, okay, well, it really does make you question what you're going to do at 125. I mean, or are we just overcomplicating things by going, okay, the guy's in a slump right now, he's just trying to learn how to win again and try to win at this level. So
yeah, I think there's no doubt he's in a slump. We've seen that with his results. The obvious, addition to the conversation is his size. I mean, he's undersized. I mean, we saw that last year. I know the coaching staff at Ohio State was going back and forth. Is this the right call? Should we pull him out? Based upon, can he physically mature, physically develop in it with a year in redshirt? Regardless of what the outcome of that decision was, they pulled him out. They put him in the lineup, and that was the best option they had this year as well. But he just hasn't seemed to grow, and that there are certain things that your body just can't do if it's not ready to do. If your body's saying I can't grow, I'm sure Malik Heinzelman is doing everything he can to put on size, but if your body's not willing to grow, it's not willing to grow. And I think that's the case. Will he ever mature? That's probably one of the other questions on the minds of the Ohio State coaching staff. We have this hugely, immensely talented kid, but will he ever mature into a true? Yes, he can make the weight and he can compete, but will he be a legitimate sized body for 125? Because if we could get his body there, the talent's there. And we've seen it at the age group levels, to your point. But we may never see that. And I think what we're seeing from Malik at this point is there's just nowhere to hide. I mean, week in, week out, there's nowhere to hide in this conference. There's no easy wins. Everything is a struggle. Everything is going to be a fight. And when you start getting in your own head and start overthinking things with the obvious, obstacles he's got to overcome, it's a really tough position to dig yourself out of the hole. So I don't know what the other options are. I think this guy is the best guy for Ohio State, but it's getting to the point where he's not only trying to fight his opponents, he's trying to fight what's going on in his head. And that's a really, really difficult thing to do in the midst when you're basically, your only choice is you got to wrestle out of it. And when you're fighting against yourself, questioning yourself, doubting everything, I mean, it feels like you're stuck in quicksand. Literally, when you're out there and you're thinking just, you're in quicksand when you're thinking and overanalyzing things out there. And that's what I'm seeing when I'm watching him, just as an observer. This guy's, his biggest opponent is himself right now. And the opponents across the mat are an obvious obstacle, and they're a big hurdle to overcome. But I think the biggest hurdle is himself. And how do you get him out of that? And I mean, that's always the tough thing as a coaching staff. I mean, I'm sure they're dissecting everything. They're not just throwing their hands up as like, this guy can't get it done. No, I'm sure they believe in this kid, and they know despite, his size disadvantage, he's got other things that they know he can bring to the table. And right now, what we're not seeing from him is the fight that we saw out of him in certain situations last year and even early first half of this year.
Well, and then sometimes, Matt, people are just small. Rob Eider, I think, walks around till this day about 110, 112 pounds, and he was a 48 kilo guy internationally. But yeah, again, those are questions that, I mean, we're not going to be able to solve here on the show. And I think it puts Tom Ryan and Jay Jaggers and the staff there at Ohio State. And I think I think my perspective is Maybe the best thing is try to convince them, just go out and have fun. The winning usually comes when you're having fun. And of course, it's not fun when you're getting beat and you know that you're probably technically and tactically better than somebody and they still win the match. I realize that's a frustration, especially when you're undersized, whether it be at 125 or if you're an undersized heavyweight, when you're getting beat by these gargantuans and you're stepping on at 210 and you just can't move these guys. So there's a couple weight classes where you can definitely see that. But that's something we'll wait to see on how Heinzelman maybe gets out of his head or decides to say, all right, I've put it into a higher gear come the stretch run of the season. Now, 133 pounds, Ridge Lovett over Jordan Decatur. This is one that, again, you talked about in our notes. We're saying this is not a skill thing. This is not a talent thing. This is the Big Ten chewing you up and spitting you out, especially for a young true freshman.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at Decatur, it comes down to a fight thing. I think almost every match that I've seen him compete in this year, he's gotten the first takedown. He comes out, he takes you down. I mean, he's dynamic on his feet. But then when the reality of the Big Ten match sets in, it's all about the fight. That's what it comes down to. And, when I'm just from an observer outside in, I'm not seeing the fight that it takes from Decatur. And this is typical, especially with a true freshman, because these guys who are so immensely talented, who've won so many titles at every level, state titles, national titles, been on world teams, when you've had that much success and not that much opposition. And don't get me wrong, I know he's taken losses here or there, but by and large, he is never, and most top true freshmen around the country have never had to rise to the occasion multiple times on a weekend, let alone week in to week out. We're talking multiple times on a weekend, and you go to a tournament like Cliff Keen, you're going to get tested 5 times in a row. At the Big Ten tournament, you're going to get tested round 1 through the finals. Whatever placement match you're in, it's a big test. It's a big fight. And so that is probably one of the biggest things with the most elite talent coming out of high school when they've never been tested.
Other side of the coin here, though, Ridge Lovett's a true freshman. And
right.
He shows the toughness, comes back and, doesn't get flustered with that first takedown. So you've got two guys that are in that same boat as never tasted really a whole lot of defeat. I mean, Lovett placed in Fargo like 50 times or something like that. I mean, he was definitely a double-digit Fargo All-American. So that kid knows how to win, and Decatur knows how to win coming from a really, really good wrestling state like Ohio. So I'm curious, you've got two true freshmen, and do you see them going in different directions, or do you just think this is something that one has adapted pretty well, and the other one is still, he's only been in the lineup for a couple of weeks. It's not like he's been the guy from the get-go. So perhaps it's the learning curve or the developmental skills. Sometimes, like when you have a kid who may be behind developmentally in terms of their motor skills, and it takes them a little bit longer to catch up. And then when they catch up, okay, it's not an issue. So, but again, is it something like that where the developmental of the wrestling acumen being in the lineup was stunted a little bit because he didn't start right away?
Yeah, I would tend to think if I'm Ohio State, they probably let Decatur, and I was in this situation a lot, where you knew that this guy was the best guy in your team, but you, as a true freshman, but you wanted to give him some time to develop and get exposed to D1 competition without the pressure of putting on the singlet and going out underneath the spotlight in the Covelli Center. So let him go to some open tournaments, wrestling unattached. People still know who he is, right? Decatur's a big name. People know who he is. When he steps out on the mat in an open tournament, they know, oh, this guy was X ranked coming out of high school. But again, it's away from the spotlight somewhat, where you can just truly compete and try and figure out what this college game is going to be. And I think they gave him enough room to expose himself to college competition where they felt, okay, this guy is clearly the best guy at 33. Is he quite ready to go? No. Probably the only way we're going to figure that out is if we throw him in the Big Ten competition, and it's the fight or flight center, JB. When you get in the Big Ten schedule, you'll either rise up or you'll shrink away. And I think there's still time for Decatur to recover. But when you look at the difference between Decatur and Lovett, what I would probably make the distinction of coming out of high school, one guy won more on talent, the other guy talent and skill, the other guy won more on a grit toughness, a foundation of toughness. When I look at Lovett, that's kind of what he reminds me of. He's already got that built-in toughness where, I don't think, as talented as Decatur is, he ever had to dig, even though he probably got pushed. His skill level was such in the age groups that he was wrestling in, he never had to dig in deep to pull something out with just grit, toughness. And I think that I think it will come if he embraces this. Like, this is a weakness. Like, I just can't get by on talent alone. There's got to be a deeper element of that, a deeper grittiness, deeper level of toughness, because, hey, you've proven you can go out and take down anybody in the country. Can you do it for 7 straight minutes? And it's putting those minutes together, which are going to be the critical next steps for Decatur. And, I'm sure the Ohio State wrestling staff's a bit nervous because there is time, just not a ton of time left on the clock.
He could potentially have Sebastian Rivera if he's back this weekend. Of course, also looming on the schedule, Roman Bravo Young. So the exams are only going to get tougher from here on out. Speaking of somebody who's acing exams, Luke Pletcher, again, setting that table for that Nick Lee-Luke Pletcher match in a couple of weeks, 11 days as we record this. Pletcher, another major decision over another solid Chad Red. So Chad Red's got to sit there. He's gone through Nick Lee and Luke Pletcher back-to-back, and this guy's a 2-time All-American going, man, this tournament's going to be tough. So I think Pletcher riding high, 10-1. Again, we say that there are marquee matchups every year, and Lee and Pletcher, if you start at the beginning of the year and say, is Nick Lee-Luke Pletcher going to be a marquee matchup, I think people just kind of look at you and go like, it'll be pretty good. But now it has become a marquee matchup of February, and I'm waiting to see it. And it's we've got guys that are going to be scoring points. I think I heard one set of fans actually say Nick Lee doesn't score enough points, and I was like, yeah, okay. Luke Pletcher, that was a knock on him too. Now we're going to see what we might have expected is a 3-2-5-4, and I'm hoping to see 13-12 or something. Maybe good wrestlers aren't going to give up that many points, but Pletcher dominant on Chad Red, and again, we've got to look past some certain matches here. I mean, there's some matches in between, but Nick Lee, Luke Pletcher, I'm waiting for that in 2 weeks.
I mean, at this point, the question is who's riding the hotter hand, Nick Lee or Luke Pletcher? I don't know. It's almost like they almost raise the stakes. They watch the other's performance and say, I'll up you one. And each week the stakes just keep escalating. And, going into this match, we thought we would talk about this individual match. You have a 3-time All-American versus or 2-time All-American, and there's not anything to discuss. The only thing to discuss in this individual matchup is the matchup that's looming in 2 weeks from now.
Yeah. Who beat Chad Red worse? I guess that's the comparison, and that's unfortunate because Chad Red again is a super talented, really good wrestler.
Yeah, so I mean, when you're looking at these guys, this is probably one of the best storylines in the country that nobody anticipated coming into the season. That arguably 2 of the best guys, 2 of the Hodge contenders, are emerging from a weight class that we knew that they were good, but never thought that they would be in that elite discussion. And now these 2 guys are 2 of the probably top 5 guys in the Hodge discussion. Now that's going to change in a couple of weeks when
somebody's going to lose.
Yeah. But leading up to that point, these are arguably the 2 most dynamic wrestlers in D1 right now. Arguably.
Yeah. And here's the thing. I don't even know if we can really, I mean, how do you spend quality time on this? Because we've already given them just praise constantly the last couple of weeks. And it's just like, well, we're going to do more of the same. And it's like, yeah, we know Pletcher and Lee is going to be a good one in 2 weeks. And I think when we get to that show, I think that's when we can sit there and harp on that praise even more, because as we get through this duel, I think the one last one, I want to hold off on Sammy Sasso until we get to our 149 discussion from the Oklahoma State Missouri duel that'll lead into there. A couple things that jumped out at me in the last 2 matches. Of course, Quinn Kinner wrestling up at 157. He started the year at 133. That one, Peyton Robb got up big with 6 points right off the bat, nearly got the fall, and then from there on out, it was cruise control. So, got caught in one big move. Really don't know what Quinn Kinner is. He had that win on Friday night, but I mean, come on. We'll look at Peyton Robb, a much more national quality type of opponent here. So it's like, okay, are we gonna see more out of this Quinn Kinner, Elijah Cleary situation? 57. I don't know. Interesting. I mean, I usually don't see somebody go from 33 to 57 during the same calendar year. And then of course Isaiah White, the gut. It wasn't pretty, but then he comes out and gets the fall at the end and pandemonium breaks out, and yeah, just the way to win a duel there, exciting Big Ten duel. So those two things were the most stand out to me, I guess, about these last two matches.
Yeah, the only thing that I would say at 157, if you're bumping up at 33 to 157, you're saying you don't have an answer at 157. Whatever you've been getting at 57 is not the answer, and they're looking for any possible solution there. So I don't think, at this point, that's basically the equivalent of a coach throwing up his hands like, all right, I'm going to throw a kid up 3 weight classes. Like, you're saying we don't have an answer here. We don't know. We literally don't have an answer. So that's all I would say about that. It's interesting at 165, the tale of two injuries from 2 dual meets, and how one guy, we're heaping criticism, we're piling on, the whole wrestling world's looking to attack and beat this guy down in Austin DeSanto. But then we're lifting up this guy. What did White? I know I heard the sound clip, but after the match, he basically said, Manning said the equivalent of, like, it ain't going to fall off. You're not going to die, so you might as well finish this match. So he was like, okay, I'll go finish this match. And he figured it out. He didn't just suck it up. He sealed the win. He not just sealed the duel, but did it in such a dramatic way. He pinned Ethan Smith, which was phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way to end a duel. I mean, now you want to talk about exciting and just craziness. So, again, as I alluded to last episode about, if you've got Isaiah White in overtime, I like your chances, even though getting to overtime is probably the most frustrating thing about Isaiah White, because how good he is and the ability to score points when he wants is kind of maybe that frustration when you've got a guy that's that good, especially on his feet, and can finish and has a pretty good attack rate and pretty good conversion rate when he gets to your legs. Good chance you're going to score. There's very few people that can stop him. So, I'm sure you're thinking, okay, he's going to get the riding time. Okay, now he's going to get in a sudden victory, get the win. Well, he said, no, screw that. I'm going to get the cradle. Oh, look, a cradle. Oh, look, fall. Oh, look, celebration. Oh, look, I can go watch the Super Bowl now. So,
and again, if I'm Mark Manning, sorry, JB, for jumping in there, but that's exactly what you want from a senior with the dual meet on the line. Like, it doesn't matter the circumstance. What it spoke to me about Isaiah White is how much he actually cares about this team and how important this team is to him, because he had the excuse. I mean, he was clearly dinged. They taped the ankle up. He's limping around. He's gimping around, but this is a huge match for Nebraska and where they think and what they believe they can do. It's a big difference between having an excuse away from a dual meet win and disregarding that excuse. And by that, I mean, your ankle is injured. You are definitely not 100%, but disregarding that and saying this team, this performance is more important than anything, and I'm going to find a way to get it done. And those are situations, JB, that can carry you through the postseason. Like, that was a defining moment, because every team is looking for every team is looking for a reputation. Everybody is looking to define the personality of their team, and that was a big defining moment for the Nebraska program for this season.
Yeah, and what do they do with that? Is it a defining moment for us looking on the outside in, or is that something they're going to be able to kind of bottle up and run with and try to run it through the stretch run of February into the Big Ten championships? Now, moving on, as we've got more Big Ten discussion, one match here from the Wisconsin-Purdue duel that really kind of had us really concerned, lack of a better term. Trent Hilger won by disqualification over Tommy Pinola at heavyweight, and what had happened was Hilger got hit with a headbutt, and then they went through the concussion protocol. Believe it was a penalty point in that situation, because if it's a disqualification, if there's a penalty scored there. I went back and watched the match again, and in a vacuum, in that second period headbutt, that looks like, okay, little iffy. But then if you were watching the whole match, you see a headbutt at the end of the first period. Hilger pointed it out to the referee and goes, hey, I mean, and it was this exact same situation in the second period. And it was one of those things where you want to give the athletes the benefit of the doubt that they're not doing anything insidious. And I'd say insidious may be a pretty strong word for this situation, but it was intentional. It clearly was intentional. Fool me once, how the saying goes. this one was I haven't heard back from Chris Bono whether or not Hilger's going to wrestle this week against Penn State, because he's got Seth Nevels looming also in that duel. We've got Roman Bravo Young, Seth Gross, and then Wick and Joseph. So we're curious to see, does that play a role in the dual meet outcome? And you kind of wonder. I just hate to see it. I mean, I don't think there's any place for it. That, leading with your head is one thing. Leading with your head is another, I guess, is what I'm doing. And I'm they're athletes. They're going to make mistakes and things of that. They're still, developing as people. But it's just, I don't know what the situation is with Hilger coming back. It kind of, hopefully we get to see Hilger and Nevels. Hopefully this is just, he got his bell rung, and, it's the concussion protocol gets cleared by match time. I'm not sure what Wisconsin's progress is or situation is, because as we talked about in previous episodes, different schools have different procedures with their concussion protocol. So hopefully we see Trent Hilger out there. But I thought the accident itself, I really hope that there's been some programmable, I guess, punishment in some regard to make sure, hey, you can't do this. This is, okay, yeah, we lost the match. This just is not a good look, in my opinion, for a guy that really runs a clean program at Purdue.
Right. And this seems the exception to the rule. If you know Tony Ursuline and the type of program he runs, in the nature of our sport, we're a contact sport. Incidental contact happens, headbutts happens. To your point, leading with your head with the intention of making contact is much different than leading with your head, because we lead with our head in wrestling. Leading with your head and incidentally making contact with another person. This seemed more intentional when you take it in the context, the entirety of the match. I definitely think there was an intention of making contact directly head to head. Yeah. So
did he intend to put him out of the match? No, I doubt it. I mean, I seriously don't think there was anything sinister here. But again, it was a shot, and it was not exactly clean. So again, I don't necessarily want to crucify this kid for essentially what's a mistake. And you get, there's your freebie. Guess what? You lost the match by disqualification. I hope you've learned your lesson from here on out. I don't necessarily want to get preachy, but I'm going to get preachy here for a second. Just don't do that again. So I think that's really what we basically all there is to say about the situation. And
like it or not, JB, he now has a target on his back. This is going to follow him through to the next dual meet, to the Big Ten tournament. You better believe that coaches will be getting in refs' ear, like, hey, this kid got DQ'd for headbutting. Watch for head contact. This will be something they prep in the locker rooms with the ref. They're chirping at the refs' mat side during the Big Ten tournament. So he's going to carry this with him through the remainder of the season and maybe beyond. But back to Trent Hilger. And again, you're correct. Schools have differing concussion protocols, but by and large, they're kind of standardized. And if this is my thing, and I try to find out about this, and maybe we can, if he went into concussion protocol, it'll be interesting to see if it comes out the decision Wisconsin made to end the match. Was it an illegal hold?
Well, if it was illegal, it would be recovery time. It would be down here versus injury time up there.
Right. But what I'm saying is and
they don't run concurrently.
Right. So it leads me to believe he automatically has to go into concussion protocol. There's some things that are out of the coach's hands and in the athletic trainer's hands. And this is one thing that I always deferred if you really dig into head trauma and the severity of it and the long-term effects of this, you got to take it seriously. And, I would say the latter half of my career, the last 5-6 years, any kid that got dinged in the head, I would say, you're off the mat, go to Noel, my athletic trainer at Binghamton. It's in his court. You told me something was wrong with your head. It's out of my hands. I'm putting in to my athletic training staff to make the decision. Once you enter the concussion protocol, typically you have to be symptom-free for a week. And you also have to pass a test. You do a baseline test. And now I'm getting into the weeds a little bit, Jason, but I think this is something that people need to be informed of. So you have a baseline concussion test at the beginning of the year, which it basically gives you your stats and your baseline testing of what you've produced when you're symptom-free, when you're completely healthy. If you get a concussion and you go into concussion protocol, they use that baseline test. Not only do you have to be symptom-free for a week, but you also have to go into your baseline testing, submit those results again, and they have to be within range of where your original baseline test, and then you're released to compete. So what my concern is here with Hilger, I'm sure he wants to compete. Mm-hmm. Will he be allowed to compete? I don't think he'll be allowed to compete if he entered concussion protocol based on it started on Sunday. That would go Sunday to Sunday, would be a full week off the mat before they can evaluate him to see if he's symptom-free.
Yeah, like I said, I haven't heard back from the coaching staff yet as we record this on Tuesday, so something to keep an eye on. And for those that are sitting there looking at the matchup that may be unaware of that, well, we're making you aware of it, so ease up on the duck calls in case that does happen on Friday night. Now, moving to the Big 12, this was one where we didn't really get a chance to really even touch on Monday. Oklahoma State beat Missouri. Missouri, again, having a down year for their program. They're still ranked in the top 25, 26-6. One of the matches there. 149 pounds just got more complicated as Brock Mahler beat Boo Llewellyn in sudden victory. And now we can bring that Sammy Sasso back into the discussion because I looked up at the rankings from Flow Track, the Open Mat, Win, and Amateur Wrestling News, and WrestleStat, which WrestleStat is not a subjective ranking. They are only looking at it from a statistical aspect. It's the ELO chess ranking. If you're familiar with that, I am amazed because we don't have a whole lot of crossover between chess and wrestling, save the guys at WrestleStat and maybe Ray Brinzer. But looking at the number ones across the board now, Sasso, Lugo, Sasso, O'Connor, WrestleStat. So let's remember, consider that your freshmen, they don't have as many matches to pull from. Now, number 2, Lugo, Mahler, Lugo, Llewellyn, Lugo, Sasso. We see a lot more uniformity once we get past 1, 2, and 3. Now 3, we go O'Connor, Llewellyn, O'Connor, Lugo. Then we go Mahler, Lugo, Mahler. So it seems like you're seeing a consensus is Sasso, Lugo, O'Connor, Mahler. Llewellyn has dropped to 5th, pretty much consensus, and Brayton Lee getting the 6th, although we do have track wrestling with O'Connor at number 6 and WrestleStat with Jarrett Dagan at number 6, Kanan Storr at number 7. Then you get to Brayton Lee at number 8. So, well, Boo Llewellyn just solved the question of who's number 1, but what's also interesting is Sasso's the only one of those top 5 with 2 losses, whereas everybody else has got 1 loss. So that's definitely something to look at. And, WrestleStat down there with the ELO chess ranking with Austin O'Connor with the 1 loss at number 1. So interesting.
I will defer to you on this, JB, because you've got much more experience on the ranking. I tended not to, like, for me as a coach, and I guess this is a way to establish this moving forward. As a coach, did I want my guys ranked? Yes. If they were in a range 1, 2, 3, 4, give or take, it didn't really play on my mind that much. It is important. Don't get me wrong. It is important. I would say based upon the timing of Sasso's losses, right? Mm-hmm. If I'm correct, they're both in December, first half of the year.
Yes.
And so he's gone on a pretty good run this last 6 weeks and beat several highly ranked guys in succession or within the last month, where a lot of these other guys have taken a loss in the last 30 days, correct?
Yeah, and that's sometimes when you look at the dual meet rankings as a comparison, or if you're looking at how you apply the same logic from dual meet rankings to individual rankings, which was actually a topic on one of the Flow podcasts this week, is, let's look at it. Well, the matches happened. Well, we also see that in college football. When does a football team take a loss? That also it can knock you out of the national championship college football playoff picture if you take that loss in December. But if you're sitting there taking a loss to a highly ranked non-conference opponent, probably at a neutral site at the Peach Bowl or whatever the heck the building, Mercedes-Benz or whatever in Atlanta, that loss in August is basically wiped away because you go through your conference schedule. So that's one thing to consider. Now, Sasso, looking at where he took his losses, okay, he's got Brayton Lee at the Cliff Keen, and he's got Brent Moore in the dual meet. Okay, Brent Moore is no longer wrestling competitively in college wrestling, which is unfortunate. So essentially his common opponent lost. It's kind of been thrown out because he did avenge that win later. So he's avenged both of his losses, and they both came before we even got to the 2020 on the calendar. So there is something to be said about avenging losses and basically being kind of even. He's got 2 losses. Well, not anymore, essentially, in terms of the way you look at it in some respects. But then you've got, the strength of schedule situation. O'Connor was hurt for the first part of the season. His first real he had a match before the Midlands, but again, going through and then taking a loss to Lugo at the Midlands without having, all of November and most of December to get some wins under his belt too. So I'm curious on the thought process. But right now, looking at how they're shaking out with the consensus 1, 2, 3, 4 of the 6 rankings that people predominantly use have Sammy Sasso number 1. I think that's a natural progression. When other people have lost, he's gotten to the point where he had beaten, Lugo and Lee that weekend, putting himself at a strong number 2. And now, what's interesting is how Llewellyn has fallen. He seems to carry down where Mahler has, and then Mahler doesn't, he's kind of blocked. So for Llewellyn to jump over Mahler, things are going to have to happen. And I don't see enough of a schedule left for Oklahoma State really for that to happen. So, but Big 12 tournament, things can happen. But again, you look at the Big 12. There's Llewellyn's the only guy in the top 6. Jarrett Dagan, if he comes back, is that going to be enough of a win to propel him, up over there? I mean, Mahler's going to have to lose in the MAC, which doesn't seem that likely. I mean, there's some bodies that could probably pick him off, but the ACC, O'Connor's probably not going to lose there. So what you're seeing here is what's going to happen until we get to the Big Ten tournament, because the only guys that can move from there on out are Sasso, Lugo, and Lee in that top 6.
So this has always been a question in my mind, JB, when you talk about strength of schedule, that it looks like Llewellyn and O'Connor have a good likelihood, and Mahler, a good likelihood of just holding serve through the conference tournament based upon who's in there. And it's almost like I've always been interested to understand how rankers base strength of schedule. Like with the guys in the Big Ten, these guys still have multiple highly ranked guys to go through by the end of the year. And more than likely they could take another loss. And
I did misspeak, actually. We've still got Iowa, Oklahoma State on the schedule. So Llewellyn, Lugo. So, basically what I just told you, and you're sitting there cursing at me, not realizing this match existed. Yes, forgot about this match, does exist. So, yes, Llewellyn does actually have a path to a top seed because, say, Llewellyn beats Lugo, then Lugo wins the Big Ten. Well, where is Llewellyn going to go? Is he going to stay behind Mahler? Or is he going to jump Lugo? And if Lugo had wins the Big Ten, he would have beaten Lee and or Sasso to do it. So rankings conundrums, ahoy.
Yeah.
So again, there's the situation. Now back to your point in terms of quality win strength of schedule. Basically, you kind of look at it and be like, okay, well, in the Big Ten, you're going to even, looking at what's left for Sasso, he's got Yaya Thomas and Jared Verclaren, okay? Neither of which are chop liver, Yaya Thomas on the junior world team. So guy is just disgustingly good on his feet. And he is a very streaky wrestler. He can be right there and be within a match of almost looking like he's a national championship contender and then lose to a backup. So he's a bit of a head scratcher type of anomaly. So he's also, that makes him dangerous for a guy like, Sasso, for example. So strength of schedule, getting to your point, is it's all in the eye of the beholder too. It's like, okay, he's going to have better guys throughout the way, or speed bumps, whatever you want to call them, trap matches. I mean, there's all sorts of different ways you can define it, but it's like, okay, don't see anything that would really, in all realities, Sasso should beat Yaya Thomas and Jared Verclaren. So he should hold course until he gets to the Big Ten. So it really just depends on the weight, because you can't, that's the one thing that's a nuance about wrestling. You see a wrestling dual meet strength of schedule. Oh yeah, you've got 2, 4, and 5. Well, if you're the 49 pounder, you could have backup number 40 and a guy that's 7 and 18, or something like that. So, it's the nuance of the sport that makes it fun sometimes, and nerve wracking is another.
And that's why coaches say, go take care of business, and the rankings will take care of themselves, right? Easier said than done.
Until they have to do the coaches panel rankings, which determine the
right.
1/3 of the qualifying spots.
Yeah.
Actually, not as much there about 49 as I thought. I think it's we've got the path to rankings. I mean, just looking at that, it's gonna be interesting. And now that I've finally didn't blank, well, I unblanked myself on Oklahoma State and Iowa. Lugo Llewellyn, that's gonna be a real big one when it comes to seeding. Now, another weight class that we've had fun with, and this is part of Iowa's closing out the weekend with a 32-3 win, and that 3 was a loss at 184 by Abe Assad against Cam Caffey. And we've talked about 184 being jumbled nationally. Well, look at just the Big Ten. We have to take out Zahid Valencia, Hunter Boland, Trent Hidley, Taylor Lujan, and Lou Dupre. So those are five really, five really good guys in the top 10 from outside the Big Ten. But when we get into the Big Ten, we're looking at Aaron Brooks, Cam Caffey, Taylor Vance, Abe Assad, Owen Webster, Rocky Jordan, Billy Janser, which is so many people have been sleeping on. He's got a pretty good resume here. Zach Brunigal, Jelani Embry, Johnny Sebastian, Max Lyon, Jack Jessen, and then, the wrestlers, unfortunately, at Indiana and Maryland are really probably not factors in this discussion. But and looking at the breakdown and how you rank the weight, I don't know, how do you rank it versus how do you seed it, Matt? What's the discussion with that? Is that what we're looking at? Because right now there's only one guy with significant matches that's got one loss in conference, and that's Aaron Brooks. I mean, Sebastian's got one loss in conference, but he's also got the least amount of matches against those top guns, and he's still got Jelani Embry, Aaron Brooks, and Cam Caffey to go on his schedule.
It just seems like those non-Big Ten guys are really going to be served nicely from these Big Ten guys just wreaking havoc within the conference. Like they're all literally beating each other. And what do you do but disrupt the rankings? If some of the guys like, the Bolins and the Dupre's are just holding serve within the EIWA and the ACC and they're not being tested, and these other, everybody in the Big Ten is literally beating each other on every given weekend, those guys are going to be the beneficiaries of these guys beating up on each other. I don't know.
Well, what's the difference between getting beating up and getting the extra look? Is there a line there that, all right, I'm going to have to make a match adjustment against a guy that he hit me with his little tricky move, and I'm going to have to be aware of it. Whereas if you're coming in blind, let's use Dupre as an example from Binghamton, since you coached there, and coming out and not getting your hands on some of these guys that have seen each other multiple times, where, oh no, that trick move caught me, and now I'm down 6-0, versus, oh no, that move caught me at the conference tournament. Now we're 1-1 going into the third versus down 6-0 for the rest of the match. So I'm always curious on how much of an advantage is it of those repetitive matchups in conference going into the nationals versus somebody who may not have had the meat grinder of a season, like coming from a MAC or from the ACC, and looking at how Valencia, Pac-12, Bolin ACC, Hidley ACC. So there's some contenders there, but Lujan's in the Big 12 and Dupre's in the IWA. So even those five that we singled out, only two of them are in the same conference. So and there's not even going to be a whole lot of speed bumps there. So the ACC is probably the one other conference with the speed bump, with Bonacorsi floating around there too.
I mean, quite honestly, you do want to see people, if you have the opportunity, you do want to see the best guys, but also given your situation, that determines how you coach your guys up or maintain their level of focus. If I'm the Big Ten coaches, I'm like, this is exactly what you need. You're getting hardened like a piece of steel. Just wait till the Big Ten and the NCAA tournament. These other guys in every other conference, they haven't been tested like you've been tested. You're going to be so much more prepared to fight every match consistently, round after round. These guys haven't been tested. Can they adapt in this situation and rise up? Well, if I'm one of those other guys like a Dupre, I'm like, hey, good thing none of these guys have seen you. We're coming in relatively unscathed. We feel physically, mentally healthy. We're ready to go. And we've prepared you and we've set the schedule up just like this, so you will physically be at your best to perform your best. So given the situation, probably determines how you coach your guys up or down.
And I want to spin that point on its head about what I talked about the trick move. Now, the other side of the coin is if you're fresh and the Big Ten guys haven't felt you have that same opportunity to hit them with something that they've not seen or they haven't had a chance to scout nearly as much. Granted, first round matchup, you've got a week and change to know who you're wrestling. So you're not really going to surprise anybody in round one unless they're, keeping that, the super secret double arm bar, rear trip, double super, suplex, whatever move you want to call it, your secret bag of tricks trick. But I'm just curious about the healthiness factor for the guy who hasn't gone through the Big Ten with the opportunity to knock off somebody who is, maybe a little battered and bruised, because we've brought this up on the show before. Nobody is 100% going into the national championship. Everybody has a ding. If it's a hangnail, it's something that's going to cause a little bit of discomfort out there. That's the issue of being a wrestler. It's a long season. So that's the other side of the coin too, is the opportunities we're talking about as being maybe an advantage for the Big Ten can also be the advantage for the small school guy as well.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think that's what you do as a coach, right? You turn everything into the most positive scenario for your guys as you possibly can.
Now, as it gets to the Big Ten, in terms of this one, now, if I were to seed it right now, and I guess I have to preface this by, again, we've still got anywhere from some wrestlers still have 4 matches to go as we're early February. Brooks is the only one with 1 loss right now, and that's the Taylor Venz. Then we've got the rest of the field. Caffey has losses to Embry and Bronigal. They were also earlier in the season, which complicates things. Taylor Venz, he's got the win over Brooks. He's also got the Wisconsin backup Tyler Dow and Max Lyon, but he's got losses to Rocky Jordan, Cam Caffrey, and Abe Assad. He's still got Max Lyon, Owen Webster, Jelani Embry, and Hins from Indiana left to go. So if I'm seeding this, let me explain what I've got and then why I've got it that way. So I've got Brooks 1, Caffey 2, Assad 3, Janser 4, Webster 5, Jordan 6, Venz 7, and then the 8-9 from there on out is Embry, Bronigal, Johnny Sebastian complicates things because he's got a limited schedule. So here's why. Okay, we've got Abe Assad. He's beaten Jordan. He's beaten Venz. He's beaten Lyon. He's beaten Bronigal. He just lost to Cam Caffey, and he's also lost to Aaron Brooks. So in theory, he's got to be behind Caffey. Well, is there a common opponent there that he can sit there? Yeah, they've split with Jordan. Assad's beaten Jordan, and Venz has lost to Jordan. So we got that complicating things. Then there's Rocky, who's beaten Jessen, Jasinski, Bronigal, and again, the Wisconsin backup. He's lost to Assad, Webster, and Janser. He's still got Jessen and Aaron Brooks left to go. Janser from Rutgers has losses to Caffey, and Brooks has Bronigal and Jessen left to go, but has wins over Embry, Lyon, Hins, Caffey, Jordan, and Jasinski. So nobody's really given Billy Janser any credit whatsoever, and this guy might be the most underrated guy at the weight class, and he's sitting down in some places he's not even ranked. And then there's a next tier where I look at Bronigal, Embry, Johnny Sebastian. Again, Sebastian with all the talent in the world. How durable is his body? Can he give it 2 more good goes? How many more opponents he's got? Again, he's got Embry, Brooks, and Caffey left. Brooks has Sebastian, Webster, and Jordan left. Caffey's got, Webster has got Brooks, Venz, and Assad left. So right now, we're going to have a completely different conversation than we are February 29th because it's a leap year. So yeah, just think about what we've already got that's jumbled and how much more complicated it's going to get, because I'm going to probably we'll save this document. So when we come back in a couple weeks and look at what we had then and compare it to now to see how bad I screwed it up, because I cannot prognosticate accurately. But as I've had it right now, Brooks is the only one with 1 loss. Yes, it's to Venz, who lost to so-and-so, but he's the only one with 1 loss in conference outside of Sebastian. So it's pretty clear he's the one going into this point in the season.
Yeah. I mean,
in the Big Ten, I don't want to sound like the one nationally, the one.
Yeah, I think if we're looking for clarity, this is not the weight class to seek out clarity, because it's going to get murkier here over the next several months. And we're not even talking about what's going to happen at the Big Ten tournament. That could be just turn everything
Owen Webster's
down.
Owen Webster has Brooks, Venz, and Assad. It's like, are you kidding me? So it's like, at what point do the wins, like the win over Rocky Jordan? Let's use Webster as an example. If Webster loses to all 3 of those guys, then all of a sudden it's like he's going to lose credit for beating Jordan, because if Jordan wins out, he's got Jessen and Brooks. Well, beating Brooks is going to complicate things a little bit differently. So probably a bad example there to compare to Rocky Jordan. But again, where does somebody like Webster, who say he beat, see, Brooks is on the schedule here for, actually, Owen Webster is a terrible example. But again, that just further illustrates how crazy it is to try to project how this is going to work. I think Brooks wins out with Sebastian, Webster, and Jordan. That's just my thought. I think Jordan's probably the toughest matchup for him based on just the body type.
Yeah, and we're seeing, it's interesting, and we probably don't have time to get into the weeds and specific things, but specifically with a guy like Jordan and Caffey, I think Caffey, was it Bronigal who majored him earlier in the year and he turned around and beat Bronigal?
Yeah, he just beat Bronigal in the dual meet, and then he lost to him early. I believe it was the Michigan State Open. So he also lost. Caffey also lost to Embry there too. Yeah,
so I think, for me specifically, if we're talking rankings, like, look at the body of work, first half of the season, second half of the season. The Caffey we're seeing now is not necessarily the Caffey we saw the first half of the year. Same thing with Rocky Jordan. And I think with Rocky, like, he was in and around Assad. He was in the mix to win that match. He figured out a way to do it with Venz. So he's a guy that I think is starting to get that taste. He's gone through that dark place. He's gone through those dark times, and coming out, much like we talked about Heinzelman, he's done it the way you have to do. He's dug in. He started to figure out how to win these tough, tight matches. It'll be interesting to see how he goes, because he's the one guy for me. he's that, and we have young guys. We have Assad in this weight class, but we kind of knew more about Assad than we have about Rocky so far. He's a guy that I'm interested to see where he goes in the next month. It'll be interesting to see. It seems like Caffey's got a hot hand right now. He's probably one of the last guys I want to wrestle in the country right now. Yeah, how long is that? How long is he going to be able to ride that hand?
I mean, Caffey out of his last, looks like 10, 7 matches, he's got the loss to Billy Janzer. I think that's why people are sleeping on why people are sleeping a little bit on Caffey is because you look at some of his losses this year. Of course, we got the Bronigal thing, we got the Embry early season. Then he loses to Tanner Harvey of American. Then he loses to Dylan Wisman from Missouri. Then he's got a loss to Zach Carlson in a dual meet in the South Beach duels from South Dakota State. So those are not exact. I mean, yeah, they're rankable. They're not Aaron Brooks. They're not Taylor Venz. They're not those type. And then, at the time, Billy Janzer, they're like, who's Billy Janzer? Now, well, Billy's had a pretty good season and very quietly had a season. So right now that loss doesn't look as bad as it did a month ago or whenever they met, less than a month ago. So, Caffey's overall resume looks kind of spotty at places, but in the Big Ten, I think it's a pretty good argument right now that he'd be the number 2 seed.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's always the thing. Like, you can't excuse away those losses because he lost. And they're like,
and where the Big Ten goes.
Losses.
I mean, you're in there in the Big Ten. I mean, how much are they looking outside of the conference for common opponents? Because as I alluded to on an early episode about how the old CAA would seed it. Get this. Here's how bizarre and just backwoods the CAA old seeding was. If you had a head-to-head win against somebody in conference, that could be outweighed by 2 common opponent wins. So if you've got a wrestler on the schedule, you beat him in your conference scheduled dual meet, that match can be superseded by non-conference wins. Okay, so we beat 2 guys who beat you, so we're now higher. I'm curious is the Big Ten that ridiculous? You've spent time in the Big Ten. Please tell me it's not that ridiculous.
It used to be, but they standardized their seeding process well over early 2010s.
Oh, thank God.
Maybe yeah. So they've had a more formalized process to how you seed, how you do the selections and everything. So, but yeah, I mean, with Caffey, one more thing to wrap up on him. You would think if you looked at the losses and not the schools, you would think that would be his conference record, but it's not. It's completely reversed. Like, his in-conference wins and record is much stronger than his out-of-conference.
Yeah, record. And then to conference, that's another thing that complicates it. Conference opponents in a non-conference setting. So, like, he lost to Janzer in the dual meet, but beat Janzer in a tournament. He lost to Embry and Bronigal in a tournament, but beat Bronigal in a dual meet. So, which one? What have you done for me lately? Or does again, that gets to the point about what I was saying about how much the conference match actually weighs in the seeding situation. But again, a month from now, when we have this conversation, Matt, we're going to be completely different. So.
I think if I remember this correctly, JB, I do believe head-to-head dual meets outweigh a tournament or regular season head-to-head matchup. I do think if they do split, the preference goes to dual meet, the dual meet win. I think that's how they used to do it. Now they could have tweaked that and changed that.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it, because like I said, we're gonna talk about this in a couple weeks, and those matches that we're seeing, those projections are going to be way upside down. I'm curious on how off this is going to be, but it's definitely interesting. Guys like Gary Janzer are going to complicate things. Guys like Rocky Jordan are now going to complicate things. Guys that were expected to have super good years like Taylor Venz is going to be sitting there as a dangerous number 7 seed potentially. Then that's where the upsets happen at the Big Ten. It's the quarters. That's where duck and cover. Crazy things happen. But Matt, as we get into this weekend, Friday, we alluded to it, Carolina at NC State. We've got Nebraska at Purdue, Penn State at Wisconsin, Saturday, Iowa at Michigan. Other ranked teams on Sunday, Penn State at Minnesota. I'll be there. Arizona State at Missouri, Northwestern at Ohio State. So that's where we are as far as the ranked teams hitting dual meets. What are you most looking forward to this weekend, Mr. Dernlan?
Oh, just everything again. I mean, this is where everything. This is where the big push happens from all these teams. So I'm more interested. I'll be watching the individual development of guys and seeing how they're progressing, some of the things that we've pulled out, like what tweaks are they making in the lineups. I don't think that we're going to see big moves and lineup changes, but tweaks in performances, tweaks in mentalities, those things, because this is where everything you've been building out is materializing and, formulating to make that big push towards March. And we're right at that point.
Right at that point, a month away from the postseason, a lot of places. So that'll wrap up episode 122 of the RUDIS Wrestling Podcast. For Matt Dernlan, I'm Jason Bryant. Make sure you get out to watch some college wrestling this weekend. If you can't watch it in person, sit down, make sure you watch it live. And always got those ratings. It's a great thing for the Big Ten Network. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the rest of the weekend here on the RUDIS Wrestling Podcast.